Time now for the Campaign Beat, our daily roundup of news from the French presidential campaign trail with Florence Villeneuve.
Hey, Rochelle.
Hi, Flo. And now there's less than 1 week to go before the election, and yet there is no clear front-runner, an unprecedented situation for a French presidential election.
With 6 days to go until the first round of this election, there are 4 front-runners battling it out at the top. Check out the latest polls. You can see that the far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon and the conservative candidate François Fillon have managed to close the gap. Given the margin of error, they are virtually neck and neck with centrist Emmanuel Macron and the far-right leader Marine Le Pen. It is the home stretch. Anything could happen. Get ready for a nail-biter at the end.
Indeed. Now, with the race so tight, candidates and their supporters are out in force trying to convince those undecided voters.
Each vote counts, and there are a lot of undecided votes to capture. Keep in mind that there could be up to 40% of undecided voters. Now, our reporter James Creedon has been following conservative François Fillon supporters. They've been canvassing for votes here in Paris, and they've actually ventured into traditionally left-wing neighborhoods, so potentially hostile ground, to try and fish for votes, and can get a little intense. Check out his report.
We're at the metro stop Max d'Ormois in Paris's 18th arrondissement. In this neighbourhood in the north of the city, the electorate is more left-leaning. François Hollande got 70% of votes here in the second round of the last presidential election. Pierre is campaigning for François Fillon. He's a local councilman and a long-time supporter of the conservative candidate. He says it's all about hitting the street and convincing voters one by one.
Do you think people can still be convinced with 2 weeks to go, or with 1 week to go to the first?
Yeah, of course, and they will be. They have to be to make their choice during the next week. So I think all will be all people will make their decision in the very last week. So that's why we are so committed on the ground to make. To present the François Fillon's project.
But campaigners are met with scepticism by some who are unwilling to overlook a series of corruption allegations, including claims that Fillon's wife benefited from a so-called fake job at the French Parliament.
I want full transparency in public spending. You should not benefit from parliamentary perks that allow you to employ your wife or whoever. I want to make some noise and protest and say no to Mr. Fillon.
Alex, who is a student, is also hoping to convince undecided voters.
Fillon is going to get what he deserves.
So have you convinced anyone to vote for François Fillon today?
Well, at least I hope, because, you know, it's a bit tough in this part of Paris to convince some people, but, well, we try and we hope so.
Fillon is polling neck and neck with the far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who has recently surged in the polls. His campaigners are targeting the same metro stop. The race is on to win over individual voters with radically different programmes. For Fillon supporters, they're hoping voters will overlook scandals and cast their ballot based on Fillon's programme of ambitious economic reforms.
Meanwhile, there's one candidate who's loving the current situation, far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Now, Jean-Luc Mélenchon has seen an incredible surge in opinion polls. Remember, just a few weeks ago, he was a distant 5th, and now he could very well make it to round 2 and perhaps even to the Élysée Palace. Now, our reporter Chris Moore was down in Toulouse yesterday to understand a little bit more about this surge and just who plans on voting for Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Well, Jean-Luc Mélenchon drawing a huge crowd to his Easter Sunday political picnic here on the banks of the Garonne. A mixture of long-standing supporters, new converts and those considering switching to the cause in the wake of his bounce in the polls.
I've never voted before.
So what is it that's made you decide to vote this time?
He's the only one who I think speaks honestly.
For now, I'm just curious. He doesn't have my vote yet. I prefer Hamon. But given the situation in the polls, I'm starting to reconsider.
Long live France, peace and Mélenchon. I hope he wins and becomes the president who unites us and moves us forward.
Well, some at the rally did vote for François Hollande back in 2012, mostly very disappointed with his presidency. They want a more social politics here in France and further afield.
We need more equality, and he's promised no cuts to state jobs, which is really important.
Renegotiating European treaties is in his manifesto. I think we should change Europe, not leave it. But there has to be an ultimatum to get out if our voice isn't heard.
Well, Mélenchon's stance on the EU starting to raise eyebrows around the bloc as his fortunes improve. His supporters want a dramatic change of tack and feel that France has the power to bring it about.
Chris Moll reporting there. Well, every vote counts here in France, of course, but abroad as well. 1.3 million French expats are signed up to vote at embassies and consulates around the world.
Our correspondents Jessica Le Masurier and Emmanuel Sermatin have been following the situation in New York City. You'll see that opinions are just as divided there as they are here in France.
The mainstream candidates in France's presidential election are not to his taste. French wine dealer Cyril Rouchon has been living in the US for 3 years, but his experience has not changed his political convictions. He is supporting far-right candidate Marine Le Pen.
For 60 years we've been trying the right and the left and neither work, so I think it's perhaps time to try something else.
Originally from Bordeaux, Cyril was a police officer in France. He does not see anything paradoxical about an immigrant voting for an anti-immigrant candidate. He does not believe accusations that Le Pen is racist.
Yes, well, I think there are some racist people in the National Front, openly racist, but I do not think racism is the solution. You can't blame the other.
Most French expats in the US tend to vote for traditional right-wing candidates. Hugues François moved to New York 6 months ago. He's canvassing for conservative François Fillon at the entrance of a French bank.
I think that he's the only one who is capable of reforming France. You get the sense that he's someone who can weather the storm.
Centrist candidate Emmanuel Macron also seems to have energised expats here in New York. French diplomat Thomas Rosignol is an organiser for Macron's En Marche movement.
Macron is the candidate of change. He's the youngest candidate, and yet he has a lot of experience both in politics and in the private sector. That's perhaps what the other candidates are missing, that sort of understanding of the professional world as well as the intricacies of politics.
There are more than 1 million French citizens living abroad. They make up about 2% of the vote. In such a tight election, that's a lot, at least enough to make candidates actively try to rally support amongst expats.
Thanks very much for that, Flo. Now, if you're interested in the French election, do check out the Election Compass. This is a tool developed by France 24 in partnership with Vox Pop Labs. It calculates how your political views compare with those of the French presidential candidates and can lead to some very surprising results.